All right, good afternoon. I want to welcome everybody today to the work session of the Mayor and Council for March 9th. And I'll call this to order. There will be time at the end of the agenda. I see we got a full house tonight. If there are people who want to make public comments, we'll get to those at the end of the agenda. So with that, I will go ahead and start. Let's start with A. One, discussion of speed limit on Punkintown Road. Councilwoman McPherson. Maybe turn on your mic or pull it down. I don't know. I can't see it.
There we go.
Okay,
How's that?
good.
Okay, so anyway, this, I actually printed it out, so I don't even have to pull it up on my tablet. This has been something we requested. I think it's been almost a year since the council had a consensus that we would look into requesting to lower the speed limit to 35 miles per hour. It is a city street. The cover sheet here, the purpose says to discuss GDOT's decision to not lower the speed limit on Punkintown Road. I need to clarify that because it's not actually their decision. Later on in the cover sheet, it's their recommendation that we not lower the speed limit. Now, we also had Pond, the company that did our complete traffic study all over the city for us, also look at Punkintown Road. They made the recommendation that it be lowered. It's 35 right now. They made it's 45 right now. They made the recommendation that it be lowered to 40 miles per hour on two of the segments. That's the curviest area. Well, it's the Punkintown road. It turns into Mirror Lake Boulevard at the traffic light where Shoreline intersects. And there they were fine with it staying at 45 because basically you don't have the ditches on the same side. You have some shoulder up there. It's also straight. That section of the road is very different. So based on what I'm getting back from what GDOT said, it says that if we lowered it, we have the authority to unilaterally set the speed limit on a city street, but doing so without their permission could take that street off GDOT's list. And when I say list, that's in regards to, they are the ones that certify our police department for running radar. And you can run radar probably there on the Mirror Lake Boulevard section. It would be hard to do it, I think, on the Punkintown because of the curve, and there's nowhere to even, you can't get enough of a straight shot to get somebody on radar. But it says that they could take that street off if we did it. And then they gave, which is on the cover sheet, they give the scenario on, it seems like it makes sense to do it based on how fast people are going, but that it's counterintuitive and that they have a formula they use, and if a certain amount of percentage of drivers are going 45, 50, and whatever, that's where they set it. So they set it, their formula is based more on driver activity, what the drivers are choosing to do, than what we think is safe, because their formula says that people drive what they feel, the speed they feel safe driving on that street. And we would all agree that that's exactly what happens most of the time, right? Especially when it's wet. And of course, we have big trucks, everything else coming down there. So I'll take some input from other people on the council on this. If we cannot lower that speed limit, the scenario we have on the cover sheet is that, they've recommended that we could put in a roundabout there at Shoreline. That'll be years down the road. What do we do in between time? At the very least, I think we should consider maybe those radar signs that flash your speed. There is, someone may know better than me because I've only read some of the material that's given to you by the companies that do this. So that might be a little bias as to how good they are at getting people to reduce their speed. Your speed is this, it blinks, it draws your attention to it, and if it's effective. I just don't think that doing nothing, there was a clear consensus, and there was a lot of citizens that requested this, that we thought the speed is a problem. I understand that putting a speed limit sign doesn't necessarily change behavior. But given the amount of speed that we give people above that before we ticket them, it really puts us in a bad position to keep people from driving 50, 55 miles per hour on that road. They can, I know you don't want me to say it, but they can go pretty fast before they get a ticket, okay? So I won't be, that's I'm sorry, I can't even get the word out. But anyway, that's pretty much it. I just don't want us to wave the white flag and go, oh, we can't do anything.
Okay, let me see if any other council members want to make any comments. Mr. Young?
We all know there have been complaints about the speed on Punkintown Road. The traffic study indicated that that street is almost 4 times more accidents than an average similar street in the state of Georgia. So there's a problem. I don't think we can just not answer the complaints about the speed. We either need to publicly tell our constituents that there's no problem with the speed, or we need to do something. I'm a little concerned that I think some of their speed data came from Mirror Lake Boulevard, not Punkintown Road, because the tape where they taped down the pressure tubes is still visible on Mirror Lake Boulevard, which is a much better road than Punkintown after Shoreline Parkway. So I'm not sure we've looked at this in the detail we should have looked at it, but we owe the citizens an answer that are complaining, an official answer.
Okay, anyone else want to comment on this? All right, so, and I don't have a whole lot of comments. Look, the reality is that people drive too fast on that road. That road is dangerous, but it doesn't seem to me that lowering the speed limit is going to resolve the issue. The data suggests that it would not. We know the road needs serious improvements. We know that there is money slated to rework that road, to rebuild that road. If this council wants to lower that speed limit, I'm not going to try to stand in your way. I'm just telling you that it doesn't make a lot of sense to change the speed limit on the road when what you're being told is that you'll no longer be able to use speed detection devices. And that seems to me to be an incentive for people to run whatever speed they want to, regardless of the sign that you've now put out there. So, I can find a way to be comfortable with doing that, but I would rather us do something that really would actually make the road more safe. But if there is a suggestion, if you want to try to task staff with working on this some more, Mr. Young, you indicated maybe some more study needed to be done on it. What would you maybe propose, or Miss McPherson? What's her name? Because you have really worked on this really longer even than Mr. Young, who has been focused on this for a while too. And we're all concerned about the safety of that road and the speed of the road. So did you have any additional suggestions that we might task staff with?
Really, the only suggestion that maybe we could get some unbiased, not just what comes from the company that produces those signs, the radar detection. I have one in my email. I think I forwarded one to Councilman Young also so he could see it. I just get tired of waving the white flag and going, oh, somebody told us we can't do it. Okay, we can't do anything. When we all know people are going too fast on that road and it's dangerous. I'm telling the people that have young drivers that come out of our neighborhood where they have to cross the lane to get, because you cannot overshoot. If you overshoot, you're down in the ditch. I tell them if they don't feel safe, have them go straight across onto Parkway Circle, circle around, and then they can just make a right, and they don't have to cross. We're trying to come out with creative ways for people to survive getting out of their driveway or out of their neighborhood.
Mr. Young?
Tom, is there anything that could be benefited from me sitting down with Bobby Elliott and going back through these studies and determinations? Is there any possibility that would benefit the city?
I wasn't involved in it, so I don't know. But I mean, you could do it.
Okay.
And let me just mention, I think Bobby did mention some of those radar signs way back when we talked about this way back. So
Well, I've
that
even
could be,
sent to Bobby some of those signs that actually flash the speed that you're going or the speed limit over there to try to make drivers more aware. And we can look at doing some of those kinds of things.
We have a vendor that can supply those, yes.
Okay, so,
You know, and I'd be glad to sit down with you.
so why don't we let you all do that, and then we'll come back and look at this thing again next month, and maybe we'll have some recommendations from staff on that. All right, thank you. And I've made a mistake here today, which I never make any mistakes, as we all know. I did not recognize our county chairwoman, Michelle Morgan, who wanted to stand up and say a few words. So let me take a moment to do that before I move on to the next item.
Thank you, Mayor Gill.
See if we turn that on.
I'm wearing my mask that I walked 100 miles to get, just FYI, my wonderful Bill Red colors. But, thank you for.
Is your mic on? It should be a green light.
Oh, here's a brighter
There
green
you
light.
go.
Okay, I'm gonna brag again. My Villarica mask, I walked and ran 100 miles to get this. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me here today for just a few moments. I wanted to introduce our new E911 Director, Clay Patterson. A lot of things we all do together, but I thought 911 is really important to you and your citizens, and I'm very excited that we hired him. He comes with an incredible resume and some really good ideas, so I'm going to take a moment, turn it over to Clay, and let him introduce himself and just give you an idea of what it's going to be looking like at 911.
All right. Clay Patterson, come on up.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we just thought it was important to, well, the chairman did and I agreed with her to come out to each city council meeting. And hopefully after I get my feet a little bit more wet in a few months, you know, I won't mind if y'all are okay with it, dropping in periodically and just checking in with you and seeing if you're having any kind of feedback from your citizens on issues. And they normally don't come to the city council with those issues, but y'all hear things in your community. And of course, our 911 center serves every community in Carroll County. And so we got a lot of things that we're hoping to move forward with here in the future. You know, we're implementing a new CAD system right now that's going to greatly benefit the entire county as well as the citizens of Villarica. That's going to help the police department out tremendously because there's going to be direct communication 24/7 between the 911 center and the actual people that are out on the streets. And that makes a huge difference coming, and I can tell you that because my entire almost 14-year career, I've been in law enforcement on that side of it. So I look forward to the changes. We're also looking in hopefully a timeline of 6 months to a year implementing Text 911, which is a huge thing. Other counties already are, some other counties, not all, so we're not behind times, but I want to get kind of on the forefront with that. We're afraid that in the next few years the state's probably going to make it mandatory, so I want to go ahead and hit the ground running on that, and I don't want to get a letter from them saying that it needs to be done. I want to go ahead and start implementing it. And Michelle the chairman's very adamant on that as well, so we're on the same page as that. Any questions that you guys have, concerns, you just reach out to me. I'll be more than willing to help. I'll come down here and meet with you. You don't always have to drive to, it may do me some good to get out of the office because
Okay.
I'm drinking water from a fire hose right now. But
Oh, welcome.
we have a great, and we have another, if you're familiar with Matt Klotfelter, he's been around this area for years and years, and the chairman appointed him a couple of months prior to myself, and he's the new CAD manager there, and he's a tremendous amount of knowledge. So I think that the 911 center is going to make tremendous strides over the next year, for sure.
Okay.
All right.
Well, welcome. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for coming. All right. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for being here today. So I will move on with the agenda now. So let's go to item 2, which is another discussion item. Danny Carter. This is regarding water service to the citizens on Leather Street. Mr. Carter.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we've been jerking some of our citizens around for a long time now. I don't know, 2-3 years or how long this has been ongoing. We finally put some meters in out on Highway 78, but now they need some help, if at all possible, since a lot of this had to do with some of the decisions made by the city. They need some help to get connected up to these meters, and I was bringing this up because I'd like to in some way satisfy and help the citizens out and put this behind us. I see where they met with our city manager, Tom Barber, and I'd like to get some input from him on that meeting. Tom?
All right, Mr. Barber, you got some backup information on this?
We met yesterday again and talked through the situation, and the genesis of the issue is that there is a driveway that services several houses off of 78, and back in the day, 2 water meters were installed about halfway up the drive, and the service lines are not typical of what we would do. In all the other cases along that road, the meters are at the right-of-way of 78, even for a house behind the 2 that we're talking about. And so the service line for these 2 meters that runs between the main and the meter is the city's responsibility, but it's on private property, which we typically don't do. So we would typically have a meter at the right-of-way. We would have a service line from the main to the meter, which would be in the right-of-way itself, because the water line would be in the right-of-way also. And then the private line, which would be from the meter to the house, would be the homeowner's responsibility, property owner. So we're trying to decide now, what do we do with a third house? Because the first 2 were not done according to the way that we handle meters or service lines anywhere else in the city. And the council needs to make a decision and tell staff if we're going to either continue the aberration that got approved back somewhere so far back, I don't even know what decade it was in, or if we're going to apply the same rule that we do everywhere else in the city and have the 3rd meter at the street and then a private service line installed. If we do that, I think it would be staff's recommendation that we waive the tap fee for the 3rd house, so that their only out-of-pocket would be the installation of the line. So we just need some direction on how to handle an atypical kind of situation.
How did a meter, one of our water meters, end up that far down close to the houses, the first 2 houses? Don't know how. It is one of our water meters, right?
2.
2 of our water meters.
We have 2 water meters on this drive from, I don't even know what, like I said, I don't even know what decade it happened in.
Well, as a result of some of the city's actions in the past, we're causing extra expense on some of our citizens. I think we ought to come up with a way of helping them get connected up to the water meters out on the highway now, whether we give them a reduced rate or whatever, delay charging them for the water and for a period of time to compensate for the problems we've caused. I'd like to see our city council come up with a solution to help our citizens out.
What's that tap fee you
Hank.
mentioned?
1,500.
Okay. That's for the meter though, right?
Well,
Because we're gonna
it's for the
we were going to
tap
do that
fee.
anyway. All right. So, if I understand you correctly, Tom, there is how large is the line that's currently coming from the main down to the 2 meters? Is it a half?
I
Is
don't
it
know that
3/4?
anybody's ever said.
I think it's a 3/4 inch line, isn't it? Just a regular line, or no more than 1 inch.
So what you have right now is let's say a 3/4 inch line. It's coming down and it's serving 2 meters, which are in effect serving 3 houses though, because a
Right.
3rd house is serving off of
The 2nd meter.
the 2nd meter. What we had proposed and what these agreements suggest that we had agreed on is that we would install 3 meters on the new 8-inch line running down Highway 78. And that then each of these owners of these 3 residences would run their own private line from each of those meters to their house. Is that correct? And that's what these agreements say. David, is that correct?
That's right.
And my concern here is that if we continue, as you say, this aberration, we're really just kicking this down the road for somebody else. This is going to be a problem down the road because we still have a 3/4 inch line serving those 2 meters on private property. Is that correct? So if we don't keep with the agreement that we made in 2019, all we're really doing is creating another problem for somebody else. It may not be for the people now. It'd be the next people that own the house, maybe, or it could be.
It's very likely to get worse in that part of the desire has been to separate these 3 properties. They were all part of a family compound at one point in time, but they've now all been separated. And conceivably.
Can you pull that mic over? Sorry.
I said conceivably, those properties may become even more separated. If any one of the owners sells it off to a unrelated third party, then it's no longer a part of a family compound any longer. So
I understand. And I've always been sympathetic to this from the standpoint that each of these people do have three properties. And I have a real concern that we're running 3 homes off of a 3/4 inch line for safety. If you needed water pressure to put out a fire, that would be minimal down there. So that's one of the reasons I supported 3 meters. I supported no cost to the homeowners for those 3 meters. And I still think that not only is that the recommendation of staff, but it's the recommendation that makes the most sense for now and for in the future. And it continues what our current policies already are. Is that correct?
correct.
Any other council members have any comments on this? Mr. Young?
It appears the city may have made some kind of agreement with these 3 houses in the past, but now the residents of these houses want to change that agreement to split the 3rd one off. It was being served off of 2 houses off of 1 water meter, which apparently the city was fine with. But for them to want to change the agreement means that they should come up to code, what our current code is. The meter should be out at the intersection of 78 in the easement area, and they should run a line to it. Whether that changes for the other 2 water meters, that's too early for me to weigh in on. But separating this 3rd house out onto a separate water meter means they need to do it the way the city does it currently.
Mayor?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. McPherson.
I see the agreements, and in a lot of ways, if people signed on to make a certain agreement, I do not want to continue policies of the past. My only concern is because it appears that we were part of the problem, and maybe this is where the waiving the tap fee will be the help. Maybe that's the best concession. And I need somebody from staff to clarify for me, because I read this at least several times, was told it. Were these people told to dig out to the street to hook on by city staff, did so, and then we discovered problems? And the reason I bring that up is that's the only thing that keeps just nagging at me is, did we cause them additional expense telling them to do something only to then backtrack and go, oops, that's not going to work? And I see that as a mitigating factor to consider. And I just think if there is a way to cut them some slack on this, because I do believe that some of the fault is on our side, maybe that's the waiving of those tap fees. I just want to see some sort of help, because I do think we were part of the problem.
Let me just ask you for clarification, because I want to understand. Are you suggesting or questioning or asking whether or not someone on staff asked them to dig this out after this agreement was made, or sometime in the past before this
No,
agreement?
I believe it would be prior, but I can't state for sure. You know how long this has been going on? It's been going on a couple of years.
I got some
probably have a
stuff here from
separate file.
2012.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know the answer to that, and I'm not. I wouldn't mind if we had the answer, but I don't know that it would change fundamentally what we essentially agreed to, because in 2019, when I was on the council sitting somewhere different, we came up with this idea, and part of our mitigation here was to say, we're not gonna charge them for those tap fees. We're not gonna charge them for those meters that we would normally charge. My guess is, you know, and this is just a guess, but my guess is the way this whole thing happened was that somebody asked enough times until they got it done. And I don't know who it could have been, because it certainly is not the people that I've been talking to. It seems like it's a family member from way on back.
This is
And
from
it
the
shouldn't have
past.
happened. We all agree with that, and that's part of us saying, look, that we got some blame here too. You know, we should not have ever allowed this to happen. And as a result of that, when we run that 8-inch line down, we're gonna tap you in 3 meters at no cost to you, which we would normally charge you for. But you do have to run your own line to those meters back down to your own home. And that seems to me to be the agreement, and that seems to me to be the best course of action for now and for the future.
And I agree with that, those 3 meters and the tap fees waived is a good thing. If there's a way to help relieve some of the costs that they're gonna have to incur to come from a long ways from the house over to the meter,
Yeah.
I think we should find a way to help them if we can.
My guess is.
Because we were part of the problem in the beginning when we allowed them to put the water meters where they did.
My guess is that we really wouldn't have a way to do that. Is that right, David? I mean, how could we find a way for some cost savings? We certainly don't need to be on private property
No, I was
digging
gonna say,
anything.
that request is for us to do work on private property, and that's not something. that
No,
we
I'm
would
not
do for
asking to go on
anybody
private property, but we have ways of, not charging them as much for the water for a period of time. Help them with the cost it's gonna cost them to run the line all the way over to Highway 78, if there's a way to do it.
I haven't heard that there's any reason that this situation has to change immediately. It's the desire of the owners to make a change, not the desire of the city. So if the owners want to make a change, then they need to be responsible for the costs for that change above and beyond the little bit that the city, a little bit, $1,500 per meter, is willing to do for them to get the meters out to where they should be.
Mr. Barber, are these meters in? We thought that it could be as early as last, okay,
When will the meters go in?
After we get the water line installed.
okay.
Oh, the water line's not in yet?
It's about halfway down the road so far.
So it seems to me that, and I'm not closing discussion on this at all, but what Mr. Young is saying is the city come in, do what we've agreed to do, put those meters in, and they tap on when they're ready. And we don't have any problem with that, right? We're not gonna turn it on until they get service there. So they can come out, hook up when they're ready, and when they can afford to do it if that's an issue, correct? Does that work for you, Mr. Carter?
Yeah, I
I mean, if we can't
understand.
get anything else.
Yeah, I understand the process has to proceed. We still gotta finish with the water line to get
Right.
water to them. The water
about you,
meters aren't
Ms.
any good
McPherson?
without water.
Say again?
Does that work for you?
No, I mean, like, say it again.
Well, listen, I didn't write all that down. So,
In a
the city
nutshell.
hasn't installed these meters yet, but our agreement was to install these meters. There is no requirement that these homeowners tap onto that meter or connect the private service line from that meter to their house. So they could do that on their own time when they're ready, but of course, it would still be at their expense.
Correct.
But that is in keeping with the agreement that we have, and it doesn't require them to move expeditiously if they can't afford to do it.
And as I understand it, after talking to the city attorney, that there's an easement right away in front of the houses, and they can come down that easement right away to get to the meters. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, all of the adjoining property owners on that Leathers driveway or street have an easement to use that driveway.
Okay, for them.
For
That is
them.
an easement for
All right,
them.
One
It's
last-
not a public road.
One last question is, why do we still have a sign up that says, calls out Leather Street? If you look at the pole, on top of the pole, it's got a sign that says Leather Street. So if it's not Leather Street, what is it? It's a private drive. Why do we call it Leather Street?
So I know about that because Mr. Carter showed me a picture of it today. I don't know how it got there. Obviously, a street sign doesn't make a street a city
But it's
street.
confusing for the people.
I agree. I don't know how it got there.
Yeah,
I have
and-
one hanging up in my office at home that says McDougal Street.
In the county, a lot
And
of
it
times
looks
they'll
just
just
the
put
same.
private drive.
It's just
Mayor,
private
just,
drive.
just to clarify one
Yes,
thing.
Ms. McPherson.
Just to clarify one thing that Councilman Young said, as far as the request being made, because this is such a convoluted thing, the request being made for them to have the change, we have to understand that nobody knew that this was going to be the change. It was the understanding that they were just going to hook out to the road. I think it has to do with, we didn't know that one house was hooked to the other. Is that the complicated part? But
We knew that.
when the request was made, they only requested a meter for that house. There was a real misunderstanding as to where the water lines were.
Oh, I
That
don't-
doesn't sound familiar to somebody?
Well, the part that may sound familiar is that when they made the request for the third meter, that was when it was discovered that you already have two on a line when you
Right.
should only have one.
Right.
And we're not gonna put a third one on that. Not gonna make the situation worse than it was. I don't remember the other piece, but
That's close enough. Nobody
Okay.
knew the scenario.
I agree that the
until then.
solution is to bring it up to code and make each one of them have their own meter. We're giving them a meter. It's just gonna cost them extra money now to run over to the highway.
okay. All right. Do we have any further discussion on this from staff? Does anybody want to add anything? We're going to continue on with the agreement that we have in place. All right, let's move on. B1, Mr. Bobby Elliott, ABL-05-21, alcohol beverage permit for Ambrosian Group, Inc., doing business as Day-Night Food Store at 764 West Bankhead Highway, and there'll be a public hearing on this tonight at 6 o'clock. Go ahead, Bobby.
Mr. Mayor, we instructed all three of these applicants to be here at 6 for the regular meeting because of the public hearing. And if we want to, we can just wait till then.
We can do that unless any council members have any questions for this. Okay, let's do the same thing for number 2. Let me read it out. ABL-04-21, alcohol beverage permit for AZF, Anacon LLC, doing business as Carroll Road Shopette. Alcohol beverage and public hearing will be tonight at 6. Any questions from council for Bobby? All right, number 3, ABL-06-21, alcohol beverage permit for 9600 Quick Mart LLC, located 9600 Connors Road. There'll be a public hearing tonight at 6 o'clock. Any questions from Mr. Elliott? All right, let's move on. Mr. Montesinos, residential subdivision design guidelines. I guess this is going to be a presentation, information only. Go ahead, sir.
Well, this has been a presentation information only for the last 2 months.
Thank you for that.
I mean, I didn't mean any offense by that. I'm just saying.
Go
that,
ahead.
we don't have anything additional to add to what we've already presented in the past, with the exception that the way this was originally presented in the cover letter was that this was an amendment to the zoning ordinance, when in actuality it was just a supplement from an operations standpoint as a standalone document and did not have any legal authority. So in making the clarification and speaking with the city attorney, we are requesting that this item be removed from the table and presented as an informational presentation, which has already been made for the last couple of months.
Okay, does anybody have any questions on this before we do that? All right, if not, I'm gonna make this, Mr. Young, go ahead. I'm ready to remove it.
I understand these are guidelines only, but I like what the guidelines say. Is there any opportunity to make sure that the developers are presented the guidelines, and if they don't follow the guidelines, when they come up to P and Z, we tell P and Z the developer did not follow the guidelines? Is that
Yeah, I
a
think
step too far?
No. I think that what we do is we use this as a tool on the front end when we have a pre-development meeting or pre-zoning meeting. And when we often have that occasion to provide the developer with a packet that has the zoning information, the design guidelines information, or the design standard information, the subdivision layouts recommendations as well as the amenity requirements. Anytime that we can present that on the front end really helps us and it helps them out as well.
But since they're only guidelines, I think I'd like to know whether or not our city staff feels that the developer attempted to comply with those guidelines. I know it's not a law, it's not an ordinance, so he doesn't have to, but there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Yeah. Well,
So, am I stretching the point of guidelines, is, the definition of guidelines?
No, I don't think you are. I think it is perfectly appropriate when you're having the hearing before P and Z for the staff to say, they hadn't complied, they haven't followed our guidelines at all. That doesn't disqualify them, but it might certainly have an impact on the Planning and Zoning Commission's opinion about it.
So that's a recommendation to you, Chris,
sure.
that you would provide those guidelines and maybe report back to P and Z or the council if they're not followed.
Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I can't catch your eye anymore. I'm like looking through two people. Just one quick question. It was my understanding these guidelines would come into play sometimes when they couldn't meet maybe some other things we like them to do, and it would provide some flexibility. Maybe you can add, would that come into play in that scenario where, okay, you can't quite do this in the architecture demands, but maybe you could add this? Or is this just all, we hope, it'd be nice if you do these upgrades, but you don't need to because they're guidelines?
Well, to your point, yes, the intention was to provide both staff and the appointed and elected officials another avenue for consideration if the developer came back and said, well, we really don't want to actually follow the standards. Then you may say, well, maybe you can consider this section of the guidelines as a alternative to what it is that you're requesting relief from. Really more specifically to Councilman Young's question or statement rather, which is the guidelines are not standards because they're really not one size fits all, and they're really more like best practices that should be considered when laying out a new residential subdivision, so you don't have a bunch of square roads, long roads with people speeding down them, and cul-de-sacs everywhere. We're looking at connectivity. We're looking at some architectural elements with respect to corner lots. We're looking at just some fenestrations where an opportunity presents itself, but cannot always apply in every situation. So we look at them as an opportunity to enhance the development, and it can be something that the Planning Commission or the council or staff actually turns into a requirement or a strongly worded recommendation or even a condition of zoning without actually having to come up with something new and abstract. There's already something that you or any of the other deciding bodies can look at and say, hey, this would make sense in this situation. Let's go ahead and request that they comply with that. So it's just another tool in the tool chest for the decision makers, as opposed to just coming up with some arbitrary thing to throw down on paper.
Well, you answered my question right in the beginning with that flexibility. I thought I remember you saying that way back when we first considered this. That's all I need.
Okay, I'm gonna make this consent 1 if there are no objections. All right, let's move on to B5, Stockmar Road drainage at 2004 Hubbard Court. Bobby, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We received a complaint from the resident at 2004 Hubbard Court that backs up to Stockmar. Stormwater is running off Stockmar through their backyards, and the original design didn't cover it exactly when they did the Chestnut Ridge subdivision. I contacted Georgia and West Engineers, Mr. John Bass, who specializes in designing fixes in established yards where we want to be sure if we go in and repair it, it's done professionally and the design will work. He gave us a price quote, $7,250 to do the design. We are estimating $20,000 to fix this problem after it's bid. We do have budgeted funds to cover it. And we do have a responsibility for that public water off Stockmore running onto private property without going.
Is this the one we talked about?
Yes, sir.
Is this, how many houses does this affect?
It affects two, Mr. Mayor, the 2004 and the neighbor.
All right, this is an initial design problem?
Yes.
Okay. Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Elliott?
Yeah, my only question was, how did we pick Georgia West Engineers? There's a lot of engineering firms out there. How did we pick them?
It was my recommendation. I trust John Bass and his design fixes for more so in established yards.
Have we used them in the past to fix things?
Absolutely, several times.
I mean, I wouldn't say exclusively, but it's a lot.
It's a good bit. We most recently, I think in 2012, he did the CDBG design through the Candler Road section where we did a bunch of drainage and all that stuff. But he's done some similar stuff, small stuff for us since I've been here in the last 3 years.
Okay.
All right, any other questions?
Mayor.
Yes, sir. Mr. Young?
Is there enough city easement or city property alongside Stockmar to do this, or are we gonna involve private property?
It's going to be, there are easements alongside of 2004 Hubbard Court that were supposed to be used to carry this stormwater. It was never done.
Okay.
So the Stockmar area is, there's plenty of room there. We're going to have to go down through the side yards of 2004 Hubbard Court to get this water out.
Okay.
So most of the work is going to be on that lot.
But that's the affected lot, though, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, are there any other questions? Okay, if not, I'm gonna make that consent 2 if there are no objections. All right, let's move on to B6. EPD mandated long-term water quality monitoring. Bobby?
Mr. Mayor, this is a yearly thing. We're required by EPD to do to monitor water quality monitoring as part of our mandated stormwater plan with EPD. We've used CCR Environmental for the last 5 to 6 years to do this work for us, to do the sampling and to put the report together. Usually we budget $20,000. That's usually what it costs. We got a little bit less this time because we got 2 sections we're off years on our sampling. Their price quote $16,415. This is budgeted, and we recommend approval.
Okay, any questions for Bobby?
Once again, a question, it's another sole source. We seem to be getting in the habit of sole sourcing things out. How does this compare to what they were charging us in the past?
Just cheaper.
You said it's about $4,000
Yeah, they
cheaper.
usually charge us $20,000 a year. This is $16,000 and change. We like to keep with the existing environmental firm. They've done all the existing trend data, and that's how the state bases where you're going in the future based on where you've been in the past. And if you've got a contractor or a consultant that's done all your work in the past, it's easy to follow rather than bringing a new firm in the middle of it and you start getting data that doesn't exactly line up with what you've had in the past.
Okay.
So that's why we use them.
All right, any other questions?
Nope.
All right, no other questions. I'll make this consent 3 if there are no objections. All right, let's move on to number 7. An ordinance to revise section 400 of the City of Villa Rica Development Regulations, sections 403.11, wastewater lift stations. Bobby?
Mr. Mayor, this is our favorite item that we keep tabling. We're here again. We still don't have a final version that we could recommend to council.
You want it tabled?
Mr. Barber suggests we keep it rolling until we can get it together.
All right, anybody got any questions before I move on?
So
All
we're
right,
planning
is
to
there a
table this?
motion? Hold on just a second. Let me check something.
We can't vote in this session.
No, I wasn't asking for a vote. Hold on. Okay, so I'll make this consent 4 if there are no questions. I just want to make sure there was a motion in there for the consent.
Can we
a
consent to
minute.
table it?
You don't
table
want
it?
to make it a consent item if it's,
Because it's,
There is a motion to table it.
If you're just gonna table it.
That's the motion. I'm gonna make it a consent.
Okay.
Consent 4. All right. Let's move on to C1. Purchase 2021 Ford F-250 service truck for building and fleet department.
The motion.
Hold on just a
before we
second.
leave the last thing,
All
the
right,
motion-
give me just a second.
The motion that you had up on that last item was a motion to approve.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was a motion to table on the cover sheet.
No.
All right, so I'll need somebody to make that change when we get to the regular.
Yeah,
Okay.
we don't want to put
In the
that
reg-
in the
okay.
consent agenda.
Gotcha. Hold on.
That's
So
what
I'm
I
gonna take
thought.
off C4. Let's move on to C1. Yeah,
I thought there was some confusion.
you get me confused. All right, go ahead, Nick.
All right. Good evening. I'll make this kind of short and sweet. I've been told by 2 different dealerships that Ford is not making base model trucks that we would normally purchase from Ford across the street, and then they would have them built. So those are not going to be available as of right now. We do have one budgeted truck. It's a F-250 service body. It'll be for the building and fleet department. This will allow us to haul various tools and equipment better than we are hauling them now. Peach State Ford has put a government concession on one of their lot vehicles. Just one truck that they already have built. It's already on their lot. He put quite a good discount on there and gave us just about state bid pricing. So this truck, like I said, it was budgeted. It's under budget. The cost was $33,932.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Nick on this one? All right, if there are no questions on this one, Nick, I'm gonna make this consent item 4,
Thank
No
you.
objection.
if there are no objections. All right, let's go ahead and go to C2, purchase 2021 Ford F-250 crew cab for building inspection department. Nick?
We have a need for another truck for our building inspector, our chief building inspector that we've recently brought on board. This was not currently, it was not budgeted in the capital items, but we have savings from other vehicle purchases that were under budget. There's enough money in those savings that we could actually purchase this additional vehicle. It's the same ordeal. Peach State has it on the lot. They put a concession on it, so we are getting it for right around state bid pricing. The cost for this truck would be $30,788. It would require a budget amendment, which Miss Sarah is going to present today as well.
Okay, any questions on this one?
Just one.
Yes, ma'am.
Mainly because it wasn't budgeted, but I know we didn't have this person. Did we plan on making this hire in the budget for this year? And if we did plan on making the hire, what were we planning on them driving? Okay,
We didn't plan on that hire.
okay. All right, well, that makes sense on why a truck would not have been budgeted for
All right, any
something.
other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if not, I'm gonna make that consent 5 if there are no objections.
No objection.
All right, let's move on to Parks and Rec, D. 1, sound and lighting, July 3rd fireworks show. Miss Ivy,
Good afternoon.
go ahead.
Well, it's that time of year. We're focusing on our summer activities, and we're going to have those fireworks this year, guys. So these items are all pertaining to the fireworks show. So the first item is for our sound and lighting. We are proposing to approve the services of Pop Audio, who we have used in the past. We sought competitive bids for the sound and lighting services. We had 3 bids that we received. We did inadvertently put a rain date in the RFP, and this vendor responded accordingly, but I've had conversation with him, so instead of us having to pay him 100% with a rain date, we only have to pay him 50%, a deposit of 50%, and if we cancel for whatever reason, we will have paid him in full. And I have that as an addendum that you don't have because I got it late this afternoon, but I can have it sent over and we can include it for the regular council meeting.
So the addendum to the agreement, you don't have in this packet, because I didn't remember seeing that.
It's not. I got it late this afternoon after having a conversation with him.
Mr. Mecklin, have you
Can we
seen
do
this
that?
addendum?
I have not seen it.
Okay, let's do this. Can you get it to us between the,
I can.
yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Okay, any questions on this?
You say we have used these people in the past?
Yes, sir, we have.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? All right, let's go ahead and move on to D2, and we will bring sound and lighting back into the regular session, just for the purposes of reviewing that addendum, okay? All right, D2.
Oh, right, same situation.
Hold on, let me
Okay,
read
sorry.
it. Mobile covered stage, July 3rd fireworks show event. Go ahead.
We again sought competitive bids for the provision of a mobile covered stage. This is primarily important for our performing groups that we have, and it just makes the attendants enjoy the activities more. Of course, this is for the ones that are early enough to enjoy the stage and the music, because if you were where I've been the last few years, all you could see was the fireworks and a lot of people. So this, of course, is a very important component. We received 2 bids for this, and again, Pop Audio was the low bid, and he again has agreed to make that adjustment for the cancellation fee.
Now, I don't recall that we've ever had this before, but you say this is a budgeted item,
Yes, sir.
this mobile stage?
The stage and the sound and lighting as well.
Oh, no, I get that. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, comment and question. I think what happened, I know you weren't here, Tracy. I think we had a stage, but it really deteriorated. That's my best memory. I don't know if anybody else can. I'm trying to look for somebody that was here in Parks and Rec.
We did have a.
We
stage,
had
but
something
had a
that
big
basically
problem.
became unsafe, didn't it? It
It
deteriorated.
caved in.
Yeah, it fell apart.
That's unsafe.
You know, like somebody's on the stage and then they're not. You know, they just fall through. No, it wasn't, but I don't know if we were that bad. So I think that was the history on that. My question is this. This is what we need to do this year. What do you think going forward long-term? Is it, you know, when you keep paying the rentals, sometimes that's the best deal over having your own? Or is the consideration also that we would have something, that we would save money if we had it ourselves and didn't have to pay for somebody to have a mobile stage? Is that something that's being looked at?
It isn't, but it certainly can be looked at. I'm believe instead of spending money year after year after year for the same thing, if we purchased it ourselves, we could even lease it to other groups in the community that were having activities, community events, to regroup some of that money. But at this time,
Okay.
we don't have anything in the budget for that. So
Yeah, and we can talk about it more in a rec committee meeting or something.
Okay.
But I was just interested because it was on the agenda to spend that money now, and that's okay. That's what we got to do. Thanks.
All right, is there any other questions on this one? If not, I'm going to make this consent 6 if there are no objections. All right, let's move on to D3, fireworks vendor, July 3rd fireworks event. Go
Okay,
ahead.
the final agenda item is to select a pyrotechnics vendor. We again sought competitive bids. We only had the one respondent, and this vendor, as a matter of fact, was who shot the show in 2019. I'm sorry, in 2019, and I've included a comparison in the Shell account from the 19 show to this show, so it appears that we have a lot more in the opening barrage part of the show than we did in 2019. As well as in the prelude to the finale. So combining those 2 areas of the show, I think we're going to have a much better show than we did in 19. So
Well, we had a good show in 19, I can tell you. Are there any other, any questions for Tracy? Okay, I'm going to make that consent 7 if there are no objections. All right,
Objection.
let's move on. Thank you, Tracy.
thank you.
Well, you have another one? No, okay. Move on to economic development. Ms. Chumley, item 1, 2021 Community Development Grant Disbursement to Billerica Gold City Lions Club.
Yes, so we weren't able to offer this grant in 2020 because of the COVID issues. A lot of us were not able to host events. A lot of the outside city events canceled their stuff. So this is for the 2021 Community Development Grant disbursement to the Billerica Golden City Lions Club. This is for their Taste of Billerica event, which will be held Saturday, October the 2nd, 2021, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Mill Amphitheater. The goal of this grant is to be used to increase economic activity in bringing tourists to downtown Villa Rica specifically. Through the development of local events, festivals, sporting events. As you guys can see in the background, this is kind of how we define and who we give to, why we give to. The Villa Rica Golden City Lions Club is requesting $6,970. This is a budgeted item. We budgeted $20,000 in '21 for this grant.
We budgeted $20,000 for the grant.
Yes, sir.
Is this how much the Taste of Villa Rica has received in the past?
Somewhere in the
Roughly the
range.
same?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
all right. Is there any questions? Miss
Go ahead.
Miss McPherson?
It's for Attorney Mecklin. How many of us are Lions up here, and do we need to disclose or recuse ourselves? Because I'm a member and my club would benefit. So do we need to just disclose that, or how?
Or can this go on a consent agenda because 3 of us should not vote on it?
I was thinking.
Well, that may be a reason not to put it on the consent agenda, and I don't know that you have a legal disqualification, but it's certainly enough of a question that if you chose to abstain from it, that it would be appropriate.
If we abstained,
We have
There
a
wouldn't-
quorum, but just need to have.
would there be a quorum if 3 of us abstained?
We're
Yeah,
still
you're
in-
counted towards a quorum even if you abstain.
Okay, oh, okay. All righty.
So as long as more vote for than against, we'll.
All right, are there any questions on this item?
Yeah, I still
All right,
have a
Mr.
question
Carter.
on this item. Did we give a grant to them year before last?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How much was that grant the previous time?
I'm not sure how much it was.
Okay, what all do they do?
Miss Sarah
for-
can tell you.
Okay.
In 2018, ooh, goodness, sorry. In 2018, we gave the Golden City Lions Club $4,315. And in 2019, we gave them $7,040. So this is slightly less.
So this is somewhat in line with that. What do they do for that amount of money? What do they do for us? What is it they do?
They use it for marketing and promotion. I think they have their tickets printed with it. They use it to rent the mill and the equipment that we have. Those sort of items.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we will have some folks who will abstain from this, so we won't make this a consent item. Make some notes here. All right, let's move on to, thank you, Janet. Let's move on to human resources. Number 1, renewal of workers' compensation insurance for 2021-2022. Ms. Rooks.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm bringing to you today the renewal for our workers' compensation insurance. What this does is it covers all the medical bills for anybody that is hurt at work. This is a requirement by the state, and our renewal period is up tomorrow. So if you will see in the yellow column that I gave you the spreadsheet, all but one of our rates went down this year. Okay, so right now they are estimating $160,696. That is before the audit. Okay, we will have a workers' compensation audit sometime in the next few months, and they will come back with either a refund or a bill. And it will probably be a bill because salaries have increased and the number of employees has increased.
Okay, council, does anyone have any questions for Ms. Rooks?
Yeah, this is
Mr.
a
Carter.
substantial amount of money, $160,500, but we only have one person that we've looked at. Is that the case, or we go?
We have several people that have filed claims and that we've paid deductibles on.
Ms. Rooks, I think he's asking providers.
Yeah,
providers.
the
No, there
provider.
is a panel of physicians that has more than one provider. I believe there are about 7 providers on there.
No, ma'am. Those who provide this insurance.
Oh, yes, we've been with Bidco for the past 3 years. Our broker, Mallory and Associates, did bid it out, and Bidco came back with the lower rates.
So we did bid it out.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was missing out of here.
Okay. And this is a budgeted item.
Okay.
All right. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay. If there are no objections, I'll make this consent number 8.
No objection.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to finance. Ms. Andrews. Number 1, approval of bank signature cards. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So in November, Council approved to switch to Synovus from Bank OZK. And we haven't done that yet. We've been waiting to kind of get switched over to the new payroll system, get through the audit and all that. Well, we're past those items and would like to move forward with this. So we did have a call with them a couple weeks ago. The first thing we need to do is establish the bank signature cards. So the good news is it's going to be electronic, so y'all will not have to sign 14 copies of everything. So yay. What I have proposed here is, so that is the list of accounts we would need signatures on. Well, the first page shows it is the mayor, the council, our city manager, city clerk, and I'm asking to also include one more staff member. So I've talked to Bobby. I think he was scared we were going to bring him the 100 checks every week. That's not the hope, but there are instances where we might have a payroll check or something that needs to be signed quickly. And if Elisa or Tom are out, then we have to call one of y'all in. So I would prefer to have an additional staff person in the event of those types of situations. Don't worry, we'll still be calling y'all for our big stacks. The second page shows that we do have some police accounts that have more restrictions on those. So this would be chief, and it would be the 2 captains and our city manager. And then one more account, which is also police, which is for the police explorers, which it's the same group as listed before, but we've included Michelle Moore, who's in charge of that program. So that is what we're proposing. And once we get this done, then we just have to send them a copy of your IDs, and then they'll be able to start sending you the digital signature cards.
Okay. Are there any questions? All right, if there are no questions, I'll make this consent item number 9.
No objection.
And there are no objections. All right, let's go to G2, fiscal year 2021 budget amendments.
All right.
Go ahead.
Hard to believe we are almost halfway through fiscal year 2021. So we do have a few amendments we need to do. Can you go to this sheet? Exhibit A. I don't know if it's named that. Okay, first one is, so council approved the customer write-offs, I think at the last meeting. And what we had done in the past is budget that in the customer service department, but that department is in the general fund. Now, we have water and sewer contribute to the general fund for shared expenses. We've talked about this, finance, HR, attorneys, that sort of stuff. And part of that was customer service. However, these specific write-offs are specifically for water and sewer or sanitation. So I'd like to charge those to those funds and not to general fund and then make water and sewer fund pay for it. So what I'm doing here is it was budgeted in general fund. I'm asking to move that budget from there to the specific funds, water and sewer and sanitation, and charge the actual write-offs there. So it's for $35,000 total. That's what I think we budgeted maybe even slightly more in customer service. You can see that I'm taking it out of that department and then moving it to water and sewer. But because it's changing funds, I'm having to hit revenue and expense in each fund. So that's the first item. Second item is for recreation software. This was approved in fiscal year 2020, but was not implemented until this new fiscal year. And so basically, since that money was not spent, it rolled into fund balance. So I'm asking to pull it out of fund balance to cover what was paid in this year. The next item was, I think back in the October meeting, council approved a purchase of 6 patrol vehicles. There was some additional expense to that than what was budgeted for each vehicle. I think it was warranties and things. So what we budgeted was $198,822 for the vehicles. The actual expense for them was $213,150. So there's a $14,000 difference. Now, unfortunately, we've had a dark time. We've had unfilled positions in the police department for all of this fiscal year. So we have some savings in the police department. I hate that it's in personnel, but this is a place that we can make the adjustment for that expense from, if y'all are okay with that. So basically taking some savings from salaries of $14,000 and moving it to the capital account to pay for it.
Right.
All right. This next item is the item that Nick just presented. So this was the truck for the new building inspection department. We had savings on 3 different vehicles. So in order to make up the $33,000 he needed for the vehicle, I'm taking it from different funds. The vehicles that were originally purchased and had savings were in different departments. So I'm having to move all those savings from the different funds into the general fund, capital fund. That's lots of uses of the word fund. Okay, but we'll combine it and then we'll be able to just pay it out of that one department. And lastly, so I did put this on here, Chief. The police department is they need to update their communications in order to be able to communicate with Douglas County law enforcement. So right now the radios communicate with Carroll County law enforcement, and he can come correct me if he needs to. But in order for them to communicate directly with, well, they can't communicate directly with Douglas County law enforcement. They have to go through Carroll County Dispatch, who goes to the Douglas County Dispatch, who then talks to the Douglas County law enforcement. So in order to upgrade our equipment, they need $35,000. They're still looking at that, so this is a round number. Hopefully it'll be enough to cover what they end up with. But taking it out of the Douglas County SPLOST to pay for that.
I did have a question on that.
Okay, Ms. McPherson?
It only makes sense that they be able to communicate, because I get those reports about how they're crossing lines, chasing somebody and that sort of thing. My question was, is that going to now make obsolete, because it seems like just recently we needed to upgrade radios, like they don't service them anymore, or whatever it is. It's the kind of technology. Is this going to just make obsolete a number of things we have, or we're going to be good, so we're not like having to throw away or get rid of stuff we had?
What we have to do is we have to reprogram some of the radios that we have now. Some of the radios are not eligible to do it. They won't work with it, but we're going to be able to phase in radios that we buy, because like you said, we are having to get rid of some, but as we phase them in, we'll add this function to them to where we can talk to Douglas County.
That's my only question. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions for the chief before he steps back? Okay, thank you, sir. Anybody have any questions from Sarah for any of these amendments?
I got
Mr.
one
Carter.
question. On, you're transferring money from previous year that was unspent into the fund balance. Are you keeping up with the running total of how much of the money has been transferred in? And does this show up in our budget when we do the budget process?
Yes. Yes. So when I do this, it shows up as budget in fund balance. So we'll see it as a budget in that use of fund balance line item. I can send you the what it's racked up to be at this point. So I'll send you an email.
Okay, any other questions? All right, if there are no objections, I'll make this consent number 10.
No objection.
All right, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
We will now move to the city manager. Item 1, approve installation of street lights on ramp from Highway 78 up to Liberty Road. Go ahead.
Some time ago, I was approached by Douglas County about a joint project where the county and the city would order from Georgia Power a set of street lights for the ramp from 78 up to Liberty Road or Mirror Lake Boulevard. Our responsibility would be 4 of the 8. This is going to involve a one-time expense, and even though it's under 10 grand, there's a monthly piece to this that's going to make this, pretty expensive over time. And there's an agreement here, so I wanted to bring it to you for approval before we move ahead with it.
Okay, and I know that this has had some discussion already. Does anybody have any questions here? Mr. Carter?
Yeah, you said there's a monthly fee to this thing after we cover the cost of 4 of the light installations, and then how much is it we're paying?
Well, it was a couple of $100 a month, I think. It's
On each one of them? Oh, on the total?
Yeah, 219.40 is what I'm looking at on this agreement.
Is that just for the 4 lights we put in, or is that for?
That's ours. Yeah, they're real expensive.
All right. Anybody else?
And just to clarify
Ms.
that,
McPherson?
that is the electric. I mean, these are LEDs, but it's that much. And I guess that's because this little loop ramp that brings people off of 78 up to Mirror Lake Boulevard and vice versa down to 78, it's dark. I mean, I tried to observe it when I was driving by it because I knew it was on the agenda. I don't
And
drive
you
it
can-
that often.
You can see why Bobby recommended that we use Greystone for the more recent light purchase there at Shoreline at the Parkway. This is expensive.
Okay, any other questions? All right, if not, I will make this C11 if there are no objections.
No objection.
All right, let's move on to H2, adoption of resolution approving the issuance of tax exempt revenue bonds. Mr. Barber.
Okay. So we have an opportunity in the Downtown Development Authority to approve a bond issue that will finance the Arbor Valley apartment complex. And as a consequence, the Development Authority is going to receive some compensation for that. We have a resolution that we need to adopt in order for those bonds to be considered tax exempt to the bondholder. So what this is going to do is lower the cost to Arbor Valley to issue the bonds, because they'll be issued at a lower interest rate because they're tax exempt. So is that clear as mud? So we
Right.
haven't done this since I've been here, but we're gonna have a set of tax exempt bonds that will be issued at a below market rate, and the bondholder is going to receive that interest income, but not be federally taxed.
All right, are there any questions on this?
Without question, I'm assuming our city attorney has looked over this and,
I have.
okay.
And so has the DDA's attorney.
And-
Fine.
All right, Mr. Young?
And this all goes back into making the TAD work. Well, the
Well-
new development, we're helping them develop that, which is going to help the TAD.
Right,
so-
we want Arbor Valley's project to go forward, and part of what will make it successful is it being tax exempt bonds.
All right, any other questions?
No, I would
All right,
ditto what Councilman Young.
if there are no objections, I'll make that consent number 12. And
No
we will move
objection.
on to H3, approval of agreement with the PHIA group cover.
So right now, in our self-insurance fund, when an application is made for payment, if we deny the claim for any reason and it's appealed, we're on the hook to defend the appeal. And there are cases where that can be very, very expensive. And so what our broker has done is gone out and taken a look at organizations that will take that responsibility for a fee. And the fee is a $1 per month per employee amount, which in our case would be, $150 a month or something. This is in my mind, a high cost, low frequency kind of insurance. We've not had issues with this, but I'll give you, for instance, where it could have happened. You remember when we took Northside out of the plan document? Let's say somebody, for whatever reason, went to Northside anyway, and then we deny the claim, right? And then they come against us. Well, in the future, if we approve this agreement, then this group would defend that and not us. So all the legal fees would be on them and not on the city.
Well, let me ask you this. Have we had to defend an appeal yet?
Not to my knowledge.
How do we know what it would cost to defend an appeal?
I don't personally, from experience, I'm just relying on Wendell's experience where he has seen it happen.
Because this is $150 a month, which is $1,800 a year. I don't, that's not a significant amount of money, but if in 3 years we've been doing this, we haven't paid a dime for these appeals, is it insurance that we need? I mean, I think that's a fair question. Council, does anybody have any questions?
Same question.
Go ahead.
I have the same question.
Yeah, it's just if we have one incident,
But you don't know what that cost. You assume it's more than,
well, I mean, just that it could be.
sure, okay.
Okay, my question
Mr.
was,
Carter.
how did we choose the PHIA group? How'd you go about choosing them?
We didn't, this is a recommendation from Wendell for all of his customer group, client base, all the companies and cities that he's representing.
So in your professional opinion, would you recommend that this be done?
Since it's low cost and we can move the burden to somebody else, I like it. And if we were to have this, it would be an area where this isn't something that the city attorney is gonna do every day. Right? I mean, this is a onesie if we have a claim like this.
So if it happens, we need somebody that's done it before?
That'd be good with me.
I would agree with that also.
Well, I mean, generally speaking, it is such a low cost, and it may provide some significant benefit were it to ever be used. So I guess, I don't see any.
It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Yeah,
I
if it
agree with
if it
that.
costs a lot of money, then that'd be
Listen,
one
hold
thing,
on.
but $1 a month, I mean,
Okay.
per employee, it seems like that's just a headache that the city doesn't ever want to have.
All right. Are there any other questions?
One other, just for
Yes, ma'am.
clarification, because we don't work with, it's north side, correct? So if one of us were to be up there, employee, whatever, have an accident, and I'm just wondering how this would play out, have an accident and that was the closest hospital, we don't work with them and they took them there, would we deny that?
Yes.
That's my understanding. They're not part of our plan.
That's just something I thought about, if that were to happen, you're not always really with it when they're transporting you. I was just curious. Okay.
My recollection was that there was a caveat for emergency services, though. I will say when I was in my car accident back in December, we went to Northside, Piedmont Northside in Jasper, and I haven't received any pushback as of yet.
Good.
And I'm on the city's
Well, you may
health
be the
insurance.
first appeal. Okay. Are there any other questions?
I guess we'll find out.
Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make this consent number 13 if there are no objections.
No objection.
All right, let's get on H4, resolution of support for changes to state highway system and acceptance of 2 roadways. Mr. Barber.
All right, this is a doozy. So,
is.
back in the day, evidently, the council approved an order in which the construction of the north bypass and the construction of the east bypass would have resulted in changes to the state highway system. Because the GDOT is still moving ahead with the north bypass, but not moving ahead with the east bypass, they need a new order to be approved by you guys. And that order would move the responsibility for what is now sections of Highway 61, move responsibility for maintenance and utilities and everything else back to the city. So this is the pavement from North Carroll in front of this building down to Happy Valley and out to Punkintown. So that is currently considered by GDOT to be State Highway 61, and it will no longer be when the north bypass is built. And then the north bypass will become part of Highway 61. And I fully understand that part and agree with it, okay? The second part of this, though, talks about us taking ownership and maintenance and utilities for the other piece. But I finally talked to Grant and discovered that what the document is talking about are the improvements on both ends, where they're going to do road expansion on Rock Mart on both sides of the roundabout and over on 61. we're still gonna have those. Okay, so it specifically talks about intersection improvements, and that was what I was missing in the whole thing. So GDOT is gonna own and maintain the bypass, but we're still gonna have responsibility for the two ends of it, where it connects to our streets. But we're gonna take all of that piece right here, what we call Main, and then 61 going out past the hospital, that's gonna become our road. So if you approve these two resolutions, then we're concurring with them that, that they can make those changes. And then I think somebody has to take this to Carroll County also, because the county, if you notice, there's county signatures in here too, so the county has to agree to this also.
Well, let me say this, I'm troubled by that for a number of reasons. I think that that becoming the city's responsibility is a heavy burden. And it seems to me that when those original agreements were made, it was because they anticipated the east leg of the bypass to move that traffic around. Therefore, you'd have these 18-wheel trucks mostly off of these roads downtown. And that seems to be another problem that come out of this. Is that fair? Mr. Mecklin?
I don't know, but I don't think this is gonna make the truck traffic on Punkintown go down.
No. But if it keeps coming through downtown, now we're gonna be paying for the roads that these heavy trucks are driving on.
Well, yeah, and I think we've pretty much concluded that no truck route signs are pretty much invisible.
Well, to the trucks,
So doing that, putting those in downtown, yeah, we're not gonna control truck behavior any more than we're gonna control speeding behavior.
All right, council, does anybody have any questions, comments?
Tom.
Mr. Young, hold on, Mr. Young.
Part of this is a temporary state route removal for the section of road from the intersection of 61 and Punkintown Road out to State Route 8 connector, which happens to be the flyover bridge. So it removes the temporary state route designation for Punkintown, the east bypass, from the state services, because it says Project PI 662540 will no longer be actively pursued in this order. How does that impact my comments in the last city council meeting about asking the mayor and city council to go back to GDOT and talk about the east bypass and whether or not there's something that can be done there?
So I've reached out to the former GDOT district engineer, who's now working privately, to work with us to try to reignite interest in that. And I've gotten the old files from Keck and Wood, who did the design, and sent them to him. And we're gonna pursue that and see if there's any life there. But it's a dead project right now,
But I think the question is, approving this, wouldn't that sort of firm up the dead project? The death of the project?
If we're agreeing that a dead project's dead, I'm not sure that does a whole lot, but.
And I think that's a larger concern that I have there as well. Does anybody else have any?
Yes.
Ms. McPherson?
I also have concern if we're trying to reignite something that we haven't talked to the governing body and even gotten a consensus on, because there was a lot of pushback from that entire side of the city, filling up the school cafeteria with people that were outraged over the fact that a bypass would go through the middle of a residential area. But the other thing, when I spoke to you, I think it was Friday when I called, because you've clarified part of that now, where I guess they want us to take care of the intersections, not that we're maintaining that additional build of the bypass. Because that made no sense.
Right.
But there also was a contradiction in some of the different documents. The mayor signed a document that said the terminus of the bypass. It was just north of Punkintown as we've always understood it. But there were other documents that were talking about terminuses and connections that were basically into Punkintown. And I saw that as a conflict, but when I talked to you, it wasn't any clearer. Do you have any better understanding
No.
on why there's a conflict in the documents?
Nope.
I'd kind of like them to know where the road's going to go in, and them all agree on every document that it's going in at a particular location. The only thing I could think of is, I thought, are they doing something temporary while they're building the road that allows you
Not that I know.
But
of.
I'm not talking to them like you are. Did anybody else notice that?
Is there any other questions on this?
No, I was just going to say the notion that 61 would be turned, or that portion of 61 from Punkintown to downtown, I thought was actually a good idea in the sense that we now have control. And, there's three things downtown that don't allow us to have control of our downtown, the railroad, 78 and 61, and this will relieve one of those. But the idea that trucks will be coming down there, I mean, that is a problem, and we're probably going to face that. But the whole purpose of the bypass is to divert those trucks. So hopefully, if they're trying to get to, hopefully their GPS will tell them to take the bypass to get over to 20 instead of taking 61 like they do now. And my understanding was that 78, though, which runs through town, will still be maintained by GDOT. So to the extent that east-west traffic is, east-west traveling traffic would be by trucks, I mean, that's still going to be maintained. It's the north-south traveling, or the north-south to the east-west would be the ones that would be, hopefully we can pull those out of downtown. And then, we might actually be able to have more of an elaborate parade since 61 is no longer a GDOT road. But I like the idea, but I do, those concerns about the east bypass and the other issues that the mayor raised are significant.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Mayor, just real quick, I
Yes,
know
ma'am.
that the trucks can continue down 78 as long as it's a state road, they can do that. But, I mean, I could be wrong on this, but I don't think those trucks like doing our downtown area. The way they have to turn and the accidents we've had. So hopefully, it's a pain in the neck for truckers to come through there. And so hopefully, just the fact that there is another option to not have to go through there to access Dallas Highway, that they will do so. I mean, I just gotta hope so.
You, Mr. Montahan and Ms. McPherson both used hopefully regarding that GPS, and I'm telling you, we've been doing hopefully for a while, and that hasn't worked.
Well, that's because it was to their advantage to do certain things. It's to their advantage to cut down Punkintown if they can get away with it.
Right. I agree with that.
Okay, are there any other questions?
I guess my only question, considering all the issues raised, Tom, what are our options tonight? Is this something that has to be done tonight? Can we push this off? I'm sorry.
Both of y'all's mics are ringing
Oh.
for some reason. I don't know if you're
Am I too
close. I was gonna ask Jim to look at that when when you get a chance. All right, go ahead.
So my question was, is this something that has to be done this evening? Can we push this off for another month to have some of these questions answered? Okay.
All right, so I'm not going to place this on the consent agenda because I'm going to object to it. And with that, I will move on to the consent agenda review, and then I will move to public comments. So let me tell you what I have, and if you'll wait until I'm finished and tell me if you have something different, I'll be happy to make that change. All right, consent item number 1 would be residential subdivision design guidelines. No. Yes. Which one did I take out?
C7.
You took 7 out.
All right. Thank you. All right, so consent item number 1 is going to be residential subdivision design guidelines. Consent number 2, Stockmar Road drainage at 2004 Hubbard Court engineering design recommendation. Consent number 3, EPD mandated long-term water quality monitoring. Consent number 4, purchase 2021 Ford F-250 service truck for building and fleet department. Consent number 5, purchase 2021 Ford F-250 crew cab for building inspection department. Consent number 6, mobile covered stage, July 3rd fireworks. Consent number 7, fireworks vendor for the July 3rd fireworks. Consent number 8, renewal of workers' compensation insurance for 2021-2022. Consent number 9, approval of bank signature cards. Consent number 10, fiscal year 2021 budget amendments, numbers 73 through 94. Consent number 11, approve installation of street lights on ramp from Highway 78 up to Liberty Road. Consent number 12, adoption of resolution approving the issuance of tax-exempt revenue bonds. Consent number 13, approval of agreement with PHIA Group Cover. Does anybody see anything different?
No.
Mayor,
Madam Clerk?
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Montan.
The two agenda items that were emailed to us today or yesterday, and are they not eligible for consent agenda? We haven't discussed them yet.
What were they? To the regular session?
Yeah, I wasn't thinking they were gonna go on consent.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I'd
We'll
like to
move
put-
these to the regular agenda. Will you put that on the regular session? Do you want to talk about them in the work session?
I'd like to, but
All right,
yeah,
well,
I'd
let's-
like for you to vote, not vote on them until tonight.
Yeah, we're not going to put them on the consent. So that is the consent agenda. Madam Clerk, if you'll prepare that. And now let's go ahead and move on to these two items. Let's see if I have it. Okay. Oh, maybe it's over here. All right, I've got it. Thank you, ma'am. All right, Tom, let's take a look at the appointment of the deputy city manager / CFO.
All right, the regs don't specifically entertain this, I don't think, but in general, department heads come to you for approval, so I'm assuming the deputy city manager would also, even if it's not specifically spelled out. But I would like to recommend that we appoint Sarah Andrews as our first, or at least my first, deputy city manager / CFO here, and that we do that effective immediately. We have taken a look at organizationally how she would get started, and what we're thinking is that she will take over some administrative responsibilities, so finance, HR, and IT would be under her control to begin with, and also one area of focus initially would be on how we do purchasing. So I think that will, get her started. If you approve this, and I was hoping to bring the Public Works Director tonight also, but it's not ready. If you approve this, then I can move ahead with the Finance Director posting, and I'll bring the Finance Director and the Public Works Director hopefully together for your approval, because same idea, council, approves all of those positions. So my recommendation is we appoint Sarah effective immediately, and then we, as soon as possible, consider the other two.
Okay, so over the last few months, we have created this position, and now you're bringing this with a recommendation for personnel to fill it. Council, does anybody have any questions for Tom? All right, I think it's a great choice, and we're excited to do it. So, Sarah, we'll take this up tonight in the regular session, and I'll see you all then. Madam Clerk, will you put that on there? All right, do you want to talk about this second one?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's hit upgrade recreation leader to manager position.
All right, so if y'all recall back one of these budget cycles, we did a reorg and moved, maybe it was my first or second fall, I can't remember, but we moved some folks around. One of the groups that we moved was the grounds crew that worked in the recreation department. We put them under Public Works, and they have primarily focused on right-of-way, with parks sort of being secondary to them. So like they go out on Mondays and they pick up trash in all the parks. They typically would be cutting outside the fields, and the recreation staff would be cutting inside the field. So we sort of maintained a presence in the park, but it's sort of catch can, and those guys also do a lot of project work for the city, like painting and repairing, and they're out there redoing the playground at the V-Plex right now. So I think now that we have Tracy on board and she sort of looked at how things are set up out there, that we want to try to go back to having a maintenance crew in the department for Tracy to control, maybe take some work off of Mark and his guys so that they can focus on the other stuff that they do. In order to do that, what we would effectively be doing is taking Michael's old position and cutting it in half, right? Because what Michael did was he did all the programming piece of athletics and he did all the field prep, okay? So what we would have now, Moochie does Michael's job, is we would focus her on the scheduling and programming piece of athletics. And then we'd have a new person that would focus on all things maintenance related, whether it's cleaning or dragging fields or lining fields, all the things that are involved in all of our fields, getting them ready to play on, sometimes every day. So that's my recommendation, and if you approve this, then we're going to move on this immediately because we have two subordinate positions to this that we want to fill. I think we just hired somebody, but we want to get them going because we're just a couple of weeks from grass cutting season, and we're going to be, you know, baseball opening day is Saturday week.
Potentially, I haven't seen the schedule yet.
So we got baseball opening day coming up. Soccer's, I think, already had opening day.
Yes, sir.
I mean, we're there, so we're behind a little bit, but Tracy and I are still figuring out what we're doing, and so that's the recommendation.
All right, council, do you have any questions? Tom?
Yes.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Ms. McPherson.
Really a concern more than a question, and part of this plays into the fact that we have our work session, our voting meeting on the same day right in a row, but I never saw this till now. But you're saying you want to move on it immediately.
If we can.
Okay, so when was this provided?
I don't know, we talked about it yesterday, so either yesterday or this morning, after we talked about it.
Okay, so
8:48 this morning on email.
What time?
8:48 this morning.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah? Wonder how I missed that one. So that's really my biggest problem, is just getting things so last minute and saying, okay, we need this, it's in a hurry, let's vote on it, it's got some money, and I don't have a thorough understanding of it. I mean, I've got what you said. That's my concern.
Yeah, I mean, the piece that's making it all aggravated, you already know about, which is that we lost all the inmates, right? So normally Mark and his guys have 12 inmates that cut with them. What we did last year, because of COVID, you know, the jail basically turned away all the nonviolent offenders, which was our pool of, you know, the pool from which we drew inmates. So we hired 6 temps to replace 12 inmates. That's extremely expensive, and it's not getting better. Last year, when we did it, we hired 6 guys who just blew us away because they had all unexpectedly lost jobs, were very qualified, very hungry, and did great work. That's not the fact today. Now, when we go to the temp agency, we've really, you know, are working toward the bottom of the barrel again. So if we don't do something on the rec side, then Mark's going to have just an impossible job, right? Because he's going to be doing rec, and he's going to be doing right away, and he's not going to have inmates, and his temps are probably going to be just a fraction of effective as the guys last year. So this is what COVID's done to us is not positive in this instance.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, just further clarification.
Go
Okay, so I finished my whole packet on Friday, but then there were some other additions. I saw the other additions. I went up, read what they were and everything else, so I'd be prepared. Who's doing this? I mean, you're talking about splitting something in half, but somebody's getting an upgrade, so they'll be in this position, right?
There is no position for this. You know, right now what we had an athletic director, and then we had some subordinates, and they were doing all of the athletic scheduling and programming and all that, and they were doing field maintenance. And that just doesn't fit the way that Tracy wants to operate the department, and it doesn't work good now for me because of COVID and what it's done to inmates and the temp market.
So this
we gotta do
upgrade,
something.
this upgrade is doing, their job is to,
They're gonna be in charge of all the parks. So they're gonna have to maintain, they're not gonna supervise it, they're actually gonna do it. And they're gonna have subordinates who are gonna be working with them. So they're gonna cut all the fields, all the parks, and do all the maintenance. It's a huge job. And the only way that we've been able to do it historically is we had those 12 inmates. Yeah, I don't think we understood how good we had it, you know.
We did.
12 free laborers.
Any other questions? Okay, Madam Clerk, make sure this is on the agenda, and if you don't feel like you had enough time to review it and you want to vote against it, it'll come up tonight. All right, let's move on to the public comment section of our meeting, and I have been provided with a second sheet. So maybe we're going to have some participations tonight. All right, so I'm going to tell you up front, please keep your comments on a professional level. We will not accept comments that are considered by the chair to be of a personal attack on any individual or group of individuals. If you deviate from this protocol, I'll give you a warning. If you deviate a second time, you're going to leave. Only one person speaking at a time, and please no comments from the audience. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. First up, Diane DeVault Wilson. Come on down. Right over here, ma'am.
There are 3 of us that signed up. I can read the whole thing, or you can stop me and we'll take turns, whichever way you want. But we're all 3 signed up.
Are you just going to read a statement, ma'am?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, if you get to a place where you want to stop and let somebody else come up, that's fine.
I don't want to stop. I'm telling you that I want 3 minutes.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Our mom had dementia, and our dad was crippled with polio. And it became evident that they needed a handicapped mailbox attached to their house. Fran, my sister, went to Carrollton, and the mapping room showed at that time that our addresses were 111, 127, and 131 Leather Street. We used those addresses for over 30 years, up until 2018. About the time that we began using those addresses, the mobile homes across from us also began to use those addresses, and they began to get their garbage and to get their mail there as well. Even though we lived, by the way, downhill, my dad was able to take care of the water by digging a ditch around our property to connect with a creek in the backyard. However, over time, with the building of Lynn's Gardens and the car wash, erosion from those properties caused their water to veer across our driveway. Fran called the state and was told that the city should have never allowed those businesses to be built without promising better provisions to handle the water. When we called the city then dug a ditch underneath our driveway, which, by the way, was called Leather Street. That's where the sign came from, and installed a drain pipe which connected the water to yet another creek, and that fixed the problem. Years later, when we noticed that water was once again eroding our street, we called the city. Mr. Milliron came out and found that the pipe that the city had installed under the street was now filled on the left side of the street. He was very angry, and he I'm sorry, and he said that whoever plugged up the pipe could go to prison for doing that. We were not responsible for plugging up the pipe, but we told him that we were not interested in sending anyone to prison either. He told me at that time that he would handle the problem. Later, I called the city to find out what was being done. I was told that the city council had voted to change Leather Street back into a private driveway. We felt that that was very unfair because we were not told that there was going to be any vote concerning Leather Street. Mr. Milliron later told us that it was the city council who made that decision. We were told by our attorney, Mr. Sam Price, that the city's action was illegal, that the city had to tell us that there was a vote affecting our property. He told us that we could sue the person who had plugged up the pipe, and we could sue the city for the action that they had taken. He also told us that we could sue the city for
Ma'am?
Okay, do you want my sister to
That'll
continue
be
reading?
perfectly fine. Is her name Fran Newton or
Yeah,
Karen Pollard?
Karen.
All right, Karen, come on up. We'll give you 3 minutes, ma'am. If you would, state your name and address for the record. I forgot to get that.
I'm Karen Pollard, and I live at 1129 Farmers High Road, Carrollton, Georgia.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. He also told us that we could sue the city for disrupting a sale negotiation we had before our street was changed into a private drive. We did not feel that our father would want us to sue his brother's children, so we chose to let God handle this issue. We felt positive, though, that if our street had remained a street, we could have sold our property to Brian Garrett, who wanted to buy it to build apartments on. Without a street, we realized that we had little or no chance of selling the property. We therefore contracted with Lester Bell to divide our property among us 3 sisters, which was my mom, was one of the sisters. He brought these deeds to the city of Villa Rica, and they were approved. Now, however, we needed water meter for the 3rd house. However, after approving our deed, a $1,250 cost for us, and after telling us that we had to dig the 3rd house line for the place for the meter to be, which was another $700. The city refused to give us the meter. The reason was because our water line was too small for 3 houses. We informed you that the 3 houses had been using that one lines for over 30 years, but the city council insisted that we needed a larger line. Do you think that we would have invested in this much money if we had known we couldn't get water? Wasn't it the city's responsibility to tell us that even though you were approving 3 deeds for 3 houses, you were going to refuse to give the 3rd house access to water? The city finally agreed to dig for another line, but the city insisted that we signed easements onto the front of each of our properties so that you could dig legally. We signed the easements. Yesterday, they were told that the signed easements and agreed to dig to where the water meters were going to be. The entire purpose of signing the easements over to the city was that you could place the meters onto those easements. It was clear to them yesterday that their signature on the easement contracts meant that we would dig to wherever you put the meters. Even if you place the meters on Bankhead Highway, which is approximately 150 yards away from our houses, we do not even own any property on Bankhead Highway, so that was the purpose of the easements. Please imagine by the way, if you were living in one of those houses and you had a sudden gush of water coming from a pipe like we just had this past fall, you have to run up to your meter to cut your water off. Imagine you were 79 years old. When I mentioned that yesterday, I was told that I had a water cut off underneath the house. Okay. Please imagine then if you were 79 years old and you must climb underneath your house all the time, the water gushing. Can you understand the importance of having a water meter placed on the easement,
Ma'am.
your property?
Is there the next person? Miss Fran Newton, if you'll come up and state your name and address for the record, we'll let you have 3 minutes, ma'am.
I don't want to just sum it up. It started really in 1972 when the city allowed meters to be put in front of the houses. The houses were right where they are now at that time. So the city put in a water line with meters for our houses in 1972. We later added another house and connected that to one of the houses, which you already know. We had Leather Street approximately most of the time that we owned the property. And when it became evident that my dad had to have some help with utilities, I went to Carrollton, to the, we've already said that, but the mapping room showed Leather Street as a street in Carrollton. So we were under the assumption that we were a street. When we found that we were not a street, it seems that city council had met and didn't even tell us that they were meeting to decide that it wasn't a street. So we had a street, we lost our street. Because we lost the street, we couldn't sell our property. So we decided to divide the property. We divided the property with the permission of the city of Villarica. We had to file applications to divide the property. Here's what I think happened. The city thought there was a water line all the way to Robert Leather's house, which is from 78 to the end of his property. There was no water line that far. And I think that's the crux of the problem. I don't think the city of Villarica knew where the water line was. And so you told us all we had to do was come from our house out to the street, former Leather Street, and we could hook on. So we spent money to dig out to the street for the third property, and then we're told we couldn't get a meter. Why didn't you know that before you let us divide the property? We feel that I had to pay
Ma'am, I'm gonna have to stop you right there. Is there anybody else that is gonna speak on this particular subject? Okay. We typically, not right now. We typically don't respond or engage in these, but this is a unique circumstance, and I'm going to address this, but after I finish public comments, okay? So give me a minute. I have one more person on the list, Jody Mount. You still want to speak, ma'am? You'll come up, give us your name and address for the record.
Jody Mount, 214 Rockmart Road. And I just want to tell everyone what a wonderful time I'm having playing pickleball that is now offered at our Parks and Rec department. I never played sports, ever, growing up. This is so much fun, and I'm meeting new people, I'm getting exercise. It's just a lot of fun, so I encourage everyone to come out. They're doing it Mondays and Wednesdays mornings, and then Wednesday nights, I understand there's a big crowd. I heard them talking about they're going to be setting up 6 nets because basketball's over now. I'm not a night person, so I don't do Wednesday nights, but it's fun, you guys. It's really fun. And you don't have to have athletic ability. I had none. I had no, like I say, I've never played organized sports, so anyone can do this. It's great fun.
All right, thank you, ma'am. I don't have anybody else that has signed in for public comments. Is there anyone else here who would like to give public comments?
I'd like to say something.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The concert on Saturday night, Friday night, okay. I didn't know that much about it at first, but I went, and I think it was awesome. The group from Carrollton, what was it, Carroll County? Carrollton it was, wasn't many people there, and it was chilly, it was cold. But anyway, it was wonderful, and I think they've got one planned for this weekend, but I don't think it'll beat the one you just had. But I just wanted you to know that I really enjoyed it, and, you know, if enough of us would get involved and come out to those things, it would be helpful to the city.
Well, that's a good public comment. Is there anybody else who would like to give public comment? Next time I'll get you to walk down there to the podium to do it. All right. So that being the case, I'm going to make a few comments on yours, and we're not going to do questions. But after this is done, if you want to meet with any of these folks, then you can do that, or with myself. But here's what I want to say. I listened to your story, and I've read your letter, and I've been involved in this for a while, and I am incredibly sympathetic to what your circumstances are. And it does seem to me that over some period of time, and maybe as far back as 1972, there's been some systematic errors that have occurred. What we are doing here today, though, and what we are trying to do is get you back on the right path. If we continue the problem that you already have, we're doing nothing for you. We're actually hurting you. That's what has happened to you over all these years. A problem has been made worse over and over and over again, and unfortunately, you guys have relied on probably some city staff or some elected official and who didn't understand what they were saying. I think you're 100% right. I think they thought that line ran all the way down to Robert Leather's property, and when they told you to dig out to that line, they thought they were going to tap you onto it, but it wasn't there. The way our schematics have worked in this city have been awful. They've been atrocious. We haven't known where lines were for years. We've done things over the last few years, though, to map out these lines, to replace these lines, to know where they're at. We're doing a better job, but this is problems of a small city, small budgets. It's just the way things happened. But we hope we're doing right by you now. I know there may be some things you'd rather us do, but I don't think that we can go that far. So I want you to know that we are sympathetic. Everybody up here is sympathetic. We've all had conversations about this at different times. So I appreciate you guys coming and sharing that with us. And we will have a time for public comment again in the next meeting if you want to do that. All right. With that, I'm going to close.